It's being called an epic nightmare. That massive cyber attack on Hollywood giant Sony Pictures, an invasion that has the world watching. On Friday, federal investigators accused North Korea of carrying out the attack. It's the first time the U.S. has openly laid blame for a hack against an American corporation on a foreign government. It's believed the attack was motivated by the Sony film The Interview about a death threat against North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Joining us now to talk about the business side of this story, Richard Levick, an expert on corporate damage control, and Jennifer Neese-Connor. She's with the Washington Business Journal. While we have you guys here, we also want to talk about another big story this week, the normalization of relations between the U.S. and Cuba, 50 years in the making. But first, the situation at Sony. They are fighting, Richard, a number of fires. The release of social security numbers and other personal information. Some of the damaging comments about top stars, once private, now public. What do you think is the worst aspect of this for Sony?
I don't really think the worst aspect is for Sony. I think it's for the rest of us. It's the chilling effect. Sony hasn't handled this well, but most of the time, companies that are the victim of a hack are concerned about personal information, PIP. And what's happened here is it's embarrassing information. And even embarrassing information has been enough to get Sony to, not only for them to pull back, but other studios have already announced that they are pulling movies not yet made or movies about to be re-released that we're going to touch on the issue of North Korea. As a result, we're going to see less artistic freedom, we're going to see less First Amendment freedoms.
Why do you say they haven't handled this well?
Well, I think that they have been concerned. Obviously, they were concerned about the embarrassment, but they were going to be criticized either way. But what we saw was just the slow release. Some of the litigation or some of the other issues you've talked about are litigation over the very fact that they didn't prepare well for hacking. No one's hack-proof, but they didn't appear to be very well prepared for this, and they had no contingency plan once it occurred.
Jennifer, a number of stars have complained about the precedent, the decision to pull the movie from theaters might set within the creative community and generally.
Well, yeah, I mean, First Amendment rights, that's one of those very first things we all talk about and learn about in journalism school, and this is one of those things, as Richard just said, the chilling effect. If this is okay with, this one movie, what does that mean to not just Sony, but the rest of the studios, to the rest of any of our free speech rights here?
One imagines the lawyers expressing grave concern about the liability the firm might face if, God forbid, something had happened in a theater Christmas Day or sometime after.
Well, you got to wonder. I mean, these are great big companies that have great big expensive communication departments and lawyers and everybody else trying to figure out the right thing to do. And you have to balance freedom of speech with public safety. And it's always kind of a push and pull. We were talking a little earlier that there's always kind of a yin and yang from when you make any kind of decisions like this. And freedom is one of those things where to limit it, you give up certain things and vice versa. So how this is actually going to play out is really kind of what the rest of the people in Hollywood and the country are watching.
Of course, a lot of technology questions raised here too. I think a lot of folks worried about how vulnerable our emails might be, our offices, the companies we run and work for, etc. Let's talk about the situation in Cuba. Is it possible that American companies will, for the first time in more than half a century, be able to legitimately do business on the island nation?
I read a very interesting factoid this week, and it actually has to factor in both North Korea and Cuba. Coca-Cola is sold in every country in the world except for two places, North Korea and Cuba. And Cuba may be one of those that could be changing in the coming years as this kind of settles out. Hard
to overstate the significance of this week's development.
Well, we're obviously going to have to drink Coke at different movies now as a result of that. But yes, I think it is significant, and for a number of factors. Clearly, the Bay of Pigs, Dennis Rodman, and going alone, having not providing any assistance to Cuba for 50 years didn't work. So it's time to try something new. What's significant is it opens up the conversation in Latin America in huge ways. Every time we would talk to Argentina, to Brazil, to any other countries in Latin America, Cuba was always the issue du jour. It was always about that. Rather than talking about export and security, it's time we start looking towards the future rather than the past. And most Americans agree with that. Most Americans agree with opening it up in a policy that clearly has not worked.
It's clear from the president's comments this week where he wants to take us. It's also clear there's going to be some pushback from some in Congress, particularly on the Republican side. It's going to be interesting, Jennifer, to see Republicans who hate this engagement with Cuba, because it means ultimately engagement with the Castro family. They're going to be in one quarter. The chamber is likely to be more aligned with the White House.
Well, and in businesses, this is a big market. It's something like 12 million people. Like, I think I heard it compared roughly to the size of Ohio. This is a place that has been untouched for 50 years. So everyone from the travel industry to the consumer products industry sees this as a new market they can get into. And I mean, travel is going to be a big thing. Lots of people have wanted to visit there for a very long time. And if that opens up, that's going to be a big change for businesses.
A potential for American citizens, tourists, to be interacting with regular people in Cuba.
Absolutely. 600,000 a year already go, mostly through Toronto. There'll obviously be far more. That won't happen right away. And Jennifer's already talked about the big impact. If the banks, when the banks go there, they go first, then logistics, then shipping. We're talking a market that's the size of Ohio, the size of another New York City. We're already seeing companies, hence the chamber, the technology universe, all lining up.
Richard Levick, Jennifer Nice-Connor, thank you both very much.